Mr. Stenberg, Nebraska senators from both parties over the years have signed on with legislation that by some estimates are unconstitutional. What would you do to set yourself apart from those senators who routinely pass laws and appropriate money for acts that are not authorized in the Constitution and clearly in violation of Article 10 of the Constitution?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the things that is now being done, and if properly done, would be very helpful in doing that, is a requirement that every piece of legislation be accompanied by a statement specifically identifying the provision of the Constitution that authorizes that action. It's a good question of what do you do when a majority of the Congress passes Obamacare? They're probably not going to eliminate themselves from office, and that's the job of the voters. The best way to get constitutional government is to elect people who respect the Constitution and abide by it, and not just vote for the politically popular thing, even though it violates the Constitution of the United States. That's the best check and balance, and the best defense of our Constitution is your vote on election.
Mr. Flynn, what would you do differently from past senators who have passed laws that are unconstitutional?
Well, I sure wouldn't sit there and take it. You know, I mean, the thing is this. That's what we've been getting, you know. And I'm really challenging Nebraskans to start thinking out of the box, and Americans. You know, we've just been kind of going in the hotter and hotter water, and it's boiling over now. And so what I would do is I would get the other like-minded House and Senate members that are in favor of what I'm in favor of, which is upholding the Constitution, and we got to get, and I would go use all mediums of communication in America today. We got to get the majority of the people activated and be concerned about it, because really there's not a whole lot of businesses that wouldn't want to get rid of the EPA or have a big reduction in the EPA, or the Department of Labor, a 70% reduction, and the only way that's going to happen is by the people. It's obviously haven't happened within the House and Senate confines, and so that's really what I'm saying we have to do as far as the Congress is go to the people, get a coalition of elected representatives, and get going and uphold the Constitution.
Senator Fischer, if elected, what would you do in reference to the Department of Education?
That's an open-ended question, isn't it? I served 20 years on a school board, and so I understand education. First of all, I am not a supporter of No Child Left Behind, and I would work to have that eliminated. I believe education and our children are best served locally, at the local level. That's where education needs to take place. When you have staff members, teachers that have to form tests to comply with No Child Left Behind, you're taking them away from their job, which is to teach our children. That's not necessary. The Department of Education, I believe, could be severely reduced, if not eliminated. There again, though, I would suggest that you have to look at each program and what that program does and if it truly has a purpose. Education, I believe, is a state responsibility that has been given to our local school districts, to the school boards, and especially to the parents in those districts.
Mr. Stenberg, you're elected and people come to you and say, Senator, what do we do about the Department of Education? What do you do?
Well, I vote to eliminate it. K-12 education is not provided for in the U.S. Constitution. It is traditionally and historically a local function. I would vote to eliminate the Department of Education, eliminate all of the rules and regulations that go with that, including No Child Left Behind. Block grant whatever federal money that we're going to provide to the states, and leave it to the states, and especially to our local school districts, to provide for K-12 education. The bureaucrats in the Federal Department of Education are highly paid folks that fill up a building or two in Washington, D.C. They don't educate a single child. They write rules and regulations that require time, expense, and take the time of our teachers away from our kids to comply with and to do the paperwork. We need to eliminate the federal rules. federal paperwork and free our teachers and principals and superintendents to do the job of educating our kids without the heavy hand of the federal government pressing them.
Mr. Flynn, how do you go about giving educational power back to these state and local school districts?
Well, I'm also in favor of eliminating the Department of Education. And the good news is, if I would have said that 7 years ago, I would have been hung. And the people in America are for that. So what I do is, I know the people are for it because there's a lot of teachers. I haven't had one person refute that they don't want to get rid of the Department of Education. I'm going like, okay, see, it can be done. And because if the people aren't behind it, then I'm just talking air. And so what I would do is, once again, I would take it to the people, and I'd get a coalition of other House and Senate members and go to the people with it. Because one gentleman said to me, he said, well, Pat, what would you replace the Department of Education with? I said, well, how about this? Parents, school boards, communities, and the state if you need it. And he said, oh, I guess that makes sense. So it's really it's the parents' responsibility. And it doesn't say a whole lot about education in the Constitution. It's the parents' responsibility.
Senator, how do you go about giving this local control back to local districts?
You have people step up and say that that's where it should be. You have parents that become more active. You have communities become more active. You have states become more active. And most importantly, you have your representatives in Washington become more active on this issue. Congress serves a purpose. Congress is a co-branch of government with the executive and the judicial. Congress should be saying and controlling the purse strings on what they want to see happen at the administrative level of the executive branch. If you control the purse strings, you can control if there even is a Department of Education. If you don't fund it, it won't be there. Congress has not been stepping up and using their power in the way that they should.
Mr. Stenberg, okay. Mr. Stenberg, you talked earlier about the EPA, and a lot of people looked at the EPA's actions and said they seem to be going after coal-fired power plants, which most of the country relies on for electricity. Are they under attack by the EPA, and what would Senator Stenberg do about it?
Yeah, coal-fired power plants are definitely under attack by the EPA. They got a new rule out now that basically would prevent the construction of any new coal-fired power plant in the United States as a practical matter through a CO2 regulation, which of course exceeds the power of the EPA. They never were given power by the Congress to regulate CO2 emissions in the first place. And this gets back again to what I proposed earlier. Number one, legislation that would repeal each and every major rule and regulation adopted by the Obama administration. They have over-regulated through almost every agency. We need to go back and start over. And we need the Congress to resume control. We need to take the power out of the hands of the bureaucrats at the EPA and at OSHA and at the Department of Labor and other federal agencies. And place that power squarely in the hands of the Congress of the United States by providing that before any new major rule or regulation can go into effect, it be submitted to the Congress of the United States and voted on by the Congress of the United States. And if they did that, we wouldn't have most of the rules and regulations that the Obama administration has opposed on.
Mr. Flynn, same issue. What do you do as Senator Flynn about the EPA going after coal-fired power plants?
Well, one interesting aspect was that President Obama said he was going to do exactly what he's doing. You know, I mean, it's not like it was a surprise. And so, but really, I would go to the business owners of America and get the funding to go for this campaign, to go after President Obama, you know, because, and really, the Congress has been usurped, but the Congress has given the power to the EPA and all these other federal agencies. So what I'm saying is we got to get the people behind this, and I keep saying that, but you know, that's the answer to a lot of our solutions, to be real frank with you. And so the EPA, there's a full-blown assault on business and life and liberty in America against it. So we really have to go after the funding too. I mean, you cut the funding and you get the people to go against it, and it takes care of the EPA and a lot of these other agencies.
Senator Fischer, some people have liked the Made in the USA policy. We're only going to buy things made in the USA. What about that for energy? Natural gas, coal, nuclear energy, oil that's just produced here in the domestic United States. What do you think about that?
I think we are blessed with an abundance of natural resources in this country, and we should be allowed to manage those resources. We should be drilling. We should be building refineries. We should be looking at alternative ways to produce energy too. But we need to realize that those alternative methods, they still aren't going to turn on the lights for us most of the time. We talked about those coal-fired electric plants. Here in Nebraska, we're fortunate that we have them because we have a very low cost of energy with regards to other states. So should we put more rules and regulations on those coal-fired electric plants and make them retrofit their plants? I don't think so. Not for a 1 cent reduction in emissions. We need to use common sense here and look at the cost to businesses, the cost to we the consumers when you're making those rules and regulations. We have the resources in this country to move forward and produce the energy that we need, and we need to do so.
Mr. Stenberg, do you support a national energy policy that just uses resources produced here domestically?
Well, I think the better approach is to adopt policies that will make us energy independent, that rely on the free market and free enterprise to do that. The United States, no thanks to the federal government, is now energy independent in natural gas. Fracking techniques have allowed us to bring the cost of natural gas down to just over $2 per million cubic feet. Incredibly low price, and we're now in a position where we may see exports of natural gas because we're producing more than we can consume in this country. We need to do the same with oil. That gas was developed on private lands. A lot of the oil is on federal lands. We need to open our federal lands to oil development, and within a decade we can be energy independent on petroleum resources. It will greatly bring down the cost of diesel fuel and gasoline in this country. Coal remains a viable resource. And again, all we need to do there is get the government out of the way. We can use coal to produce low-cost energy for our country.
Mr. Flynn, the Federal Reserve, keep it, junk it, or change it?
Junk it.
And why?
Well, number one, there's nothing federal or reserve about the Federal Reserve. It's a privately owned company, corporation, and it's a bank. It's a privately owned bank, and it's making the decisions, and it's given the 1913 law that brought us the Federal Reserve is a bad deal. There is no reserve also, and so it's a bad money system. And so I'm going to kind of look at my notes here because I don't know everything, but I got it figured out that I don't like it. So we must act, we must take back the power to issue our own money. Issuing our own money is not a radical solution. It is the same solution used in our political history by men like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, and Abraham Lincoln. So the fact of it is, there's way better solutions, and this has got us in much trouble as anything that we can possibly imagine. So it's a bad deal.